So as we get closer to a day, or maybe even the day of reckoning, we see that over the past week, Israel or northern Israel has experienced about a dozen small earthquakes. And this is all as Russia's proxies are moving closer and closer to the Golan Heights, pushing Syrian rebel forces and families over to the Golan Heights. And if you read Jerusalem Post and Debka.com this morning, you will see that Israel is warning Syria and everyone involved that they will strictly enforce the 1974 armistice agreement between Syria and Israel to the letter, which is they are getting concerned that Russia and its proxies are planning on taking the Golan Heights. And we've gone over that many times before. The Golan Heights is a location of the mother lode of black gold in the Middle East. And the way the Russians currently operate is they don't go and overtly go to war and overthrow entire nations. What they do is, if there is a piece of property that they want, they will just go and take it from that nation and then make excuses. For instance, the Ukraine situation. They didn't go and try to take over with their tanks, go move in and overthrow Ukraine the way they did in, I believe it was the 60s, I guess it was, Hungary and Poland, in the Eastern Bloc, when some of them were not towing the line back then. No, that's not how they operate anymore. If they want something, a piece of land, they won't try to overthrow the nation in order to take that piece of land. They'll just go and take that piece of land. They did it in South Ossetia, Ukraine, and something is currently going on in eastern Ukraine right now. They sent their what they call little green men. Little green men, those are men that are dressed up in a different attire, soldiers who are Russian soldiers, but Russians do not claim them. This is what's happening over in Syria as well, where you have Russians, Hezbollah, and Iran donning Syrian military uniforms, you see. So their operations, Russia's operations today are not overt, they are covert. And one has to, when you read Ezekiel 38, one has to bear that in mind, because it does appear to be covert when certain nations ask Gog, Magog, what do you think you're doing? Are you coming to take a spoil? They have questions. They're asking questions, which means it's not overt. The operation is not overt. Having said that, there's something in here that I wanted to point out so that there is no feeling of conflict or, how do I put this, contradiction in the scripture when you read it. Here's what I mean. So we'll go to Ezekiel 38, and we've read this countless times. And we'll start in verse 9. It says, "You shall ascend, rise up." Ascend means arise. "And come like a storm, like a massive cloud." Where are the clouds? They're in the sky. What is the major portion of the Russian operations in Syria? They're not ground forces, they are the Air Force in the sky. Like a cloud to cover the land. You and your army, your bands, and many people, which is different people, which it appears to insinuate proxies with you. Of course, when you read, you read who the proxies are. And of course, Iran is one of them. Now, as I've gone over this before in verse 10, "Thus saith Jehovah Elohim, it shall come to pass that at that same time shall things come into your mind, and you shall think an evil thought, and you shall say, I will go up to the land of unwalled villages." Now, is the main part of Israel a land of unwalled villages? No. What is the land of unwalled villages? And it should read unwalled hamlets. Tel Aviv is not unwalled. It's not a hamlet. What is he talking about? He's talking about the Golan Heights. Northern Israel in the Golan Heights, the mountains of Israel. It mentions this. It doesn't say Golan Heights. It says the mountains of Israel. So, unwalled hamlets. "And I will go to them that are at rest, that dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls." They don't have walls in in northern Israel up in the Golan Heights. No. They do in Jerusalem, but not the Golan Heights, you see. "Having neither bars nor gates, to take a spoil, to take a prey, and turn your hand upon the desolate places that are now inhabited." Yes, the Golan Heights are inhabited. You can look at the pictures, you can Google them, you can see. "And upon the people that are gathered out of nations that have gotten cattle and goods, and that dwell in the midst of the land, Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish," merchants, capitalists of the West. That would be the United States, because it is the most capitalist country. It is the most merchant type of country in the world. "And with all the young lions thereof, the young nations, young strong nations, shall say to you, Are you come to take a spoil?" You see, when you read that portion, "Are you come to take a spoil?" this does make it appear that the operation that Gog Magog is trying to do is covert and not overt, you see. "Have you gathered your company to take a prey, to carry away silver and gold, and to take away cattle and goods, to take a great spoil?" Now, what I wanted to show you was in verse 15, "And it shall come and you shall come out of your place, out of the north parts, you and many people with you." And it says, "riding upon horses." Well, Henry, they're not going to be riding on horses, are they? Let's have a look and take a look at this word in Hebrew. The word is C-U-W-C. I have no idea how to pronounce it. No idea whatsoever. Okay, it says phonetic spelling is Sus. Okay? Now when we go to the meanings, the definitions, let's go down past the first and second Roman numeral, and let's go to definition number 1. Chariot, horses. Okay, it says chariot, horses of Canaanites. All right, when you compare it with different scriptures. Ezekiel 27, it's chariot horses. Okay. And when you go in definition number 2, in Israel, chariot horses of Absalom. So in each of these cases, these are not horses that they're riding on. They are chariots that they're riding on. Now, in those days, they were horse-drawn chariots. But today, chariots don't have to be horse-drawn, do they? Does the definition still apply? Of course, because in each and every one of these cases, they're riding in chariots drawn by horses. So the definition infers chariots more so than horses. And if you go to definition 3, it once again says chariot horses. Then it goes to Habakkuk 3 verse 15, figurative of clouds. So this definition is not about horses as much as it is about chariots. So today, these chariots, these troop carriers, as they call them today, armored troop carriers. They will be riding on chariots, armored troop carriers. Now, as I said, or as it is written, it should say here, a great, or a mighty or abundant army, you will come up against my people of Israel as a cloud mass to cover the land. It shall be in the latter days. So when we look for a definition of a chariot horses, we have to now put it in context of the latter days, the kind of equipment that they use in the latter days, you see. And for what reason are they being lured, dragged, or however you want to look at it, into his land? Well, they are the greatest superpower in the region. And it says, so that the heathen may know me, when I shall be sanctified in you, O Gog, before their eyes. So this is how he's going to introduce himself to the heathen, to the Gentiles, to the Goyim once again, by making an example out of the largest superpower in the region. The next couple of verses are very important because we are starting to see some things. Read the news. Verse 17, thus saith Jehovah Elohim, are you he of whom I have spoken in old times by my servants the prophets of Israel, which prophesied in those days many years that I would bring you against them? And it shall come to pass in that same time, when Gog shall come against the land of Israel, saith Jehovah Elohim, that my fury shall come up in my face. Now, who would want to be standing in the presence of our Father in heaven when his fury comes up in his face? For in my jealousy and in the fire of my wrath have I spoken. Surely in that day, yes, when they go and cross into the Golan Heights, in that day there shall be a great shaking, earthquake in the land of Israel, so that the fishes of the sea and the fowls of the heaven and the beasts of the field and all the creeping things that creep upon the earth and all men that are on the face of the land shall shake at my presence. And the mountains shall be thrown down, and the steep places shall fall, and every wall shall fall to the ground. Yes, this earthquake will be so horrific that, as is written in Revelation, I believe it's chapter 6, that dirt will end up covering the invading army, or much of it. And I will call for sword against them throughout all my mountains, says Jehovah Elohim. Every man's sword shall be against his brother. Haggai 2, verses 18 through 22 backs it up. And I will rain him upon his bands and upon the many people that are with him, an overflowing rain, great hailstones, fire and brimstone. In this way I will magnify myself and sanctify myself, and I will be known in the eyes of many nations, and they shall know that he is Jehovah Elohim. And so what I really wanted to cover today was, let's get this simplistic idea out of our mind that somehow this invading army must be riding on horses the way that the Mongols did when they overran Russia and Eastern Europe and the Middle East in those days. So, before I sign off, I want to go straight to the article. Well, it's already, I have to go to Depka.com to find it probably. All right. The article is More Minor Earthquakes in Northern Israel. This is July the 8th, that would be yesterday. Another light quake measuring 3.9 rumbled through the northern town of Tiberias Sunday on the Lake of Galilee. The epicenter was 8 kilometers northeast of the town and 4 kilometers deep. Since July the 4th, northern Israel has experienced 10 light quakes. And I believe the greatest one was 4.5. And this is all as Russia's proxies are heading toward the Golan Heights. So, there was another report on the same website. I wonder if that's still there. It's no longer here. But what Depka.com was implying was that this latest so-called attack on the Syrian T4 base was a false flag. Debka.com was implying that that was a false flag in order to scuttle the summit on July the 16th between President Donald Trump of the United States and President Vladimir Putin of Russia. They're saying that Syria does not want this meeting to take place. They don't want any kind of diplomacy going on at all. What they want is the Golan Heights. And they want Russia to take it for them. So, like I said, keep your eyes open. Watch, especially around the time of the middle of this month, and we'll see what happens.